Welcome in to the DNVR Avalanche podcast, live from the Toyota Lounge, powered by your Front Range Toyota dealerships. We got Megan and Rudo coming to you on a Tuesday in the middle of August, and yet somehow we still have Colorado Avalanche news.
I'm thrilled.
Me too.
By the August 5th signing, and kind of an unexpected one.
Yeah, didn't necessarily see this coming, but not that I hate it or anything. I think it makes sense in a lot of ways. There are some upsides, some downsides. Let's stop beating around the bush. The Avs signed Oliver Shillington to a 1-year, $1.05 million contract. Yeah, I don't know what that is out there. Someone's engine is like running outside of our studio. It's very strange. But Oliver Shillington, the newest Av, he adds to the decor. Megan, what are your initial thoughts on this signing for the Avs?
A lot of conflicted emotion, but overwhelmingly positive. Okay. This was a player we've talked about on the pod as a fit, especially stylistically, but that was, of course, before Brandstrom entered the mix. So that's where some of the conflicted emotion comes in, because it is a dark day in Sam Malinsky Nation. Yeah, but
for sure.
Is also really exciting. I really like this player. I think that he fits the pace and the puck-moving style that the Avs like to play.
Yep.
Honestly, brings a little bit of the things that I like about Malinsky and Brandstrom, and what Brandstrom teases.
Yep.
He's a little bit of both.
Yep.
And so it's intriguing. I do think the number that he's come in at is a low cap hit for a player with his upside.
Sure.
I put a little asterisk by it because that still is potential that he needs to reach. And it's been hard to see what this player is capable of being, just because of he has this breakout season and then he misses some time.
Yep.
I like the way that most risks Avs have taken on players has paid out. Yep. And so I'm excited to see what an environment in Colorado could do for a player like this.
I love the point that you bring up to start us off there. Shillington had a 31-point season in 21-22 and then missed about 18 months of time. So he comes back midway through this last season. If you go look at his numbers, they're not great. But, yeah, of course they aren't for a guy who just missed 18 months. Nothing too
struggling Calgary Flames team.
Yeah.
I think the state of the team is also important to calculate in any assessment of Shillington's play.
Yeah. And so I think if you look at his immediate numbers, they might be a little bit deceiving on what people might think of him, where really he's probably a better player than what those immediate numbers show if you go back to the couple of previous seasons when he first really found his footing and became an everyday player in Calgary. It is a little bit interesting. You mentioned the Malinsky factor, who essentially gets moved back to the 8th D if the Avs do end up keeping all of these defensemen. But I guess my question would be, what order do these D end up in? Because you look at Brandstrom and DeHaan on your bottom pairing. Does DeHaan move down to the 7? Does Brandstrom become the 7? Is Shillington the 7? I kind of assume it won't be Shillington. Brandstrom and DeHaan both got essentially league minimum contracts, technically $25K more or whatever. And then Shillington gets over $1 million. So do you think the Avs see Shillington maybe ahead of those two, or where does it fall?
I do. I think the thing that Shillington has that gives him a little bit of an edge is his size. It's not to say that his game is a physically imposing one, but I do think that it differentiates from Brandstrom and Malinsky. And then where DeHaan is concerned, I think he's kind of steepled to that third pair to some extent, just because in what they've targeted for that pair historically. They kind of like the stay-at-home defenseman, and that's, of course, health pending. So I do think this will very much be a rotation of D of 3. And I do put Shillington at the top and then kind of together in a similar tier, or the same tier, Brandstrom and DeHaan.
Yep. I agree. A lot of this screams Calvin DeHaan injury insurance to me, too. The other side of that is Shillington, like both DeHaan and Brandstrom, can play both sides. He's played the right quite a bit. He can play the left. That is certainly true of Brandstrom. DeHaan used to play the right a lot, has not as much later in his career, but certainly there's a lot of flexibility all of a sudden in the depth of the Avs decor.
And when I think about the addition of Shillington. I don't necessarily think that they've constructed their decor with him in mind.
Sure.
But we see the way in which his game is more successful along a player like a DeHaan, perhaps. Yeah. And so it does seem by design. It would be maybe unlikely to see Brandstrom and Shillington together edging DeHaan out unless he's injured. Mm-hmm. And what I think is interesting about this is even how it affects the lineup above them. I'm putting Shillington on the third pair, but he's played second pair minutes, and I believe Calgary wanted an extension to work out. They just couldn't come together on the term. Yep. And he was intended to be a part of their top four. I think we'll see some intriguing pairs at camp and preseason that probably toy with the idea of maybe Shillington and Girard. Is Josh Manson being utilized in more of a third pair role that now becomes a third pair that is being played more often and distributing those minutes more evenly throughout the lineup?
Yeah. It's an interesting one. When you look at some of the underlyings for Shillington, when you look at his better years, there is a pretty high level of possession quality there. He helped with that Calgary team drive pucks in the right direction. I also look at his defensive metrics, and I would say they're just okay. He's not hurting his team by any stretch, but he's not. You don't see this dominant defense like you've gotten out of DeHaan historically, or even someone like Brandstrom's numbers look better on that defensive end of the puck. Granted, he's also a much better goal scorer than Eric Brandstrom will ever be. So,
the speed is impressive.
Yep.
For Shillington in particular of this crop of players. I think that with his size is going to be intriguing to Bednar in who he'd like to use there. And there's something that still feels so young about Shillington, even though he's 27. And even though his NHL games are comparable to Brandstrom's, who is 24, younger, and by our account also still kind of figuring things out, that experience definitely trumps someone like Sam Malitsky's, but also I view Brandstrom and Shillington as two young players with ceilings that we don't fully realize just yet.
With that in mind, is this a precursor move to something else? Is this the Avs thinking, hey, maybe somewhere down the line we're looking to move on from one of these other defensemen?
Without getting carried away, I'm looking at it like Sam Girard's contract has another year in it. Is this like a Casey Middlestat audition for a future role? Like, it's pretty low cost, low risk at the moment. And if it works out, it could be a cheaper option to sign a friendly and affordable contract like what Girard would be finishing for the future. It'd probably come in lower in that, just to be clear, depending on what he does. But if they could find a cheaper option for a future, say, Sam Girard replacement, that's maybe what I had in mind. But I didn't necessarily imagine them moving on from any players in season. I'm still not sure I'm sold on that.
Yeah.
It does feel like Calvin DeHaan insurance, just to be clear. It just seems like a very depth insurance ad, because they've seen what can happen when a player like Devon Taves gets sick in the middle of the playoffs for game 4 and comes out of the lineup.
Yep.
I think they just wanted to really load up in that way.
And for what it's worth, on a bigger picture for the Avs, in a world where neither Val Nichushkin or Gabe Landeskog is ready to go on opening night, which we know Val Nichushkin can't be ready that early, and it's starting to look more likely that Gabe won't be good to go at the very beginning of the season. Even with adding on this Shillington contract, the Avs will still be cap compliant with Landy on LTIR and Nichushkin not counting against the cap until November 13th, I believe it is. They might have some decisions to make a month into the season, depending on what happens with Nichushkin, but it's $1 million they had to spend, so they spent it. And to be honest, given what the Avs have done on the defensive side this offseason, I'm giving them a lot of credit. I think they've done a very good job of being cap efficient and building quality defensive depth behind, obviously, the stars at the top of that decor. So,
I think they had a challenging decision to make with Jack Johnson, and I'm really proud of them for being able to see what needed to happen to get more competitive in an area that they're already so competitive, but they could almost get blinded by the stars at the top to see there's actually greater need at the bottom of the lineup. And Sean Walker was kind of this, we could be doing better at the bottom of our lineup. What would that look like? And regular season Sean Walker was quite intriguing. So I think that's where they saw we could get a little more skillsy at the bottom of the D core and also just bolster in a way that we feel really comfortable with all of the plan B and C's. It's interesting, though, because they're tight on cap space, and I still feel like there were needs in the forward group that are unaddressed, and it points to optimism in Landeskog's return, to your earlier point that there's hopefully internally more news behind the scenes than we're privy to that points to more confidence in Landeskog's return at some point in time this next year. We've been told as much to count on that, but not given a clear timeline as to when we could expect to see it. But at this point, it feels very certain, expect to see it.
Yeah. To me, this move means, at least as far as the defense is concerned, the Avs are done. They've made their moves. Maybe if something crazy comes up, they're looking to subtract from this defense, but I don't really see how you can add anything else to it. So I wouldn't expect any more D to seriously be looked at for the Avs NHL lineup, at the very least. Never say never, because, you know, if a great player falls into your lap, you make it work. But certainly the offensive issue should be more pressing for what their lineup looks at right now. So, well done by the Avs to flesh out that defense. I think it'll certainly be an interesting training camp. It was already shaking up to be an interesting training camp. Now you're talking about really Brandstrom, Shillington, and Malinsky. Like you said, I think DeHaan's probably pretty locked into a roster spot. But those three are essentially battling for 1.5 spots, maybe. We'll see who comes out on top. I don't know. It'll be fun. But beyond that, Colorado, I really don't expect them to do anything else until waiver wire season, really, or whatever. They can do the Tatar signing a week before training camp starts or whatever, but I wouldn't expect a whole lot more news in August. So, oh no for us, but at least we got one day of news to talk about in the August sector of the off season, and it was a pretty interesting one for Colorado. So it should be fun. We'll see. Shillington is a UFA at the end of this contract, so if the Avs do want to make that more of a long-term thing, they probably need to be pretty aggressive about it. They have Brandstrom as an RFA, so that one they maybe have a little bit more flexibility with. But there will be a lot of things that Colorado faces this season / next off season about signing people, which is what we're going to get into in just a minute here. A lot of fun talk about the future, or maybe not fun talk, depending on how you feel about things. I don't know. I don't judge.
Before your ad break, because I think I got time to ask you, do you think the addition of Shillington points to another move down the line, like a potential trade?
I don't. I talked about it. It's something that I think could come up if the situation is right, but I think it makes a lot more sense as a rotational guy like you talked about, where all three of these guys will play. DeHaan's injury history is pretty apparent. You know he's going to miss at least 20 games. It's also insurance for Brandstrom, or the other way around, I think, because, yeah, let's face it, the Avs might believe in Shillington to have some upside. The Avs might believe in Brandstrom to have some upside. What if one of them doesn't pan out? Then you can play the other one. It makes much more sense as a adding to your depth than a, hey, we think one of these guys can replace Sam Girard or something like that right now. So not a whole lot of expectation on the Avs following up on this, at least on the defensive side. Anyway, on that note, if you're Calvin DeHaan, you might want to get with UC Health to have a season that avoids those consistent injuries that you've been having. I don't know anything about Calvin DeHaan's injuries. I probably shouldn't talk about them. What I can talk about is the fact that here in Colorado, we're excited to partner with UC Health, and Coach Prime from the CU Buffs wants to help you and other Coloradans be your healthiest selves as the Chief Motivation Officer of UC Health's Ready, Set, Co Challenge. Co is in CO, Colorado. The goal of the challenge is to get Colorado back to its rightful place as the healthiest state. Make sure you get in on the Ready, Set, Co. statewide challenge to help all Coloradans be their healthiest selves. The challenge is centered around us, again, getting back to being the healthiest state in the country. There are 4 pillars: nutrition, exercise, sleep, and mindfulness. Make sure you're checking it out at uchealth.org/ReadySetCo. If you want to join in on UC Health's challenge, click the link in the show notes of this podcast. It's uchealth.org/ReadySetCo. And once you're taking care of yourself on the health side of things, make sure you can also get yourself around town with a Toyota from one of your Front Range Toyota stores. They have vehicles for everybody, 17 different all-wheel or four-wheel drive vehicles, 16 different hybrids, including truck hybrids like the iForce Max Tundra. So they even got you covered if you're a truck guy with the hybrids. They've got SUVs like the RAV4. They've got sedans like the Corolla. They've got a car for everybody over at Toyota. So make sure you're checking out the official vehicle of DNVR and the official vehicle of the Colorado Avalanche today with your Front Range Toyota dealerships, which includes Auto Nation Toyota Arapahoe Centennial, Corwin Toyota in Boulder, Groove Toyota in Littleton, Mountain State Toyota in Denver, Stevenson Toyota East in Aurora, and Stevenson Toyota West in Lakewood. Again, they're the official vehicle of the Colorado Avalanche. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast, and the actual topic of today, not the news. We wanted to have a little bit of fun. We've talked a lot about the immediate future of the Colorado Avalanche. We haven't talked as much about the long-term future with the Colorado Avalanche, but the one thing that has been, whispers and mentions about a potential extension for Mikko Rantanen is supposedly pretty close. It's something that the Avs are looking at. One, how important is it for the Avs to lock down Mikko indefinitely for this core/era? And 2, any wild guesses on what that contract looks like?
He deserves as much money as his heart desires. I'm not great with numbers. I know it's going to come in the 2 digits, but
yeah,
I'm just not quite sure. What was Marner's contract?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Let's see. D. Okay. Well,
10.9, it looks
wow.
like.
Okay, I did see Mikko hitting 10.
Yeah.
I didn't see him crossing into the threshold of 11.
Sure.
And I thought Marner's contract was a little high, but I do think it'll be in the 10 range. And I think it's an endeavor the Avs should pursue. The term is also worthwhile just because I think we take for granted, maybe not specifically us here, but as a fan base, finding a player that complements Nathan MacKinnon, it seems like it's such an easy thing to do because of how good Nathan MacKinnon is. Yeah. But I actually think there's something Nathan MacKinnon really appreciates about how Rantanen complements his game. And I think that comfortability and familiarity that they've established is important for the future because Nathan MacKinnon's very much a part of it. And as evidenced by this offseason in particular, trade deadline, MacKinnon has a lot of influence on this group. And so I do think having a line mate, and it may not always be Mikko, but having him in the top 6 with MacKinnon is important to the future of this team.
Yeah, I mean, look, Mikko's a guy who just put up back-to-back 100-point seasons. As much as there can be frustrations from the fan base with parts of his game, the reality is he is absolutely a key component to this Avalanche team. MacKinnon and Makar are ahead of him in importance, but that's about it. Mikko's probably that number 3 guy as far as importance to Colorado's success with this core. And it just doesn't seem that complicated. Mikko's 27. He turns 28 in October. You can throw a billion years of term at him, and it really will be fine. Maybe the last couple of years of it are a little questionable depending on how he ages, or maybe they're totally fine. He's the best shooter on the team, in my opinion, has the best pure shot. Whether he wants to use it or not is a different conversation. But looking at the contract situation for the Avs, MacKinnon making 12.6. To me, Mikko shouldn't be in the 12s. Full stop. With the cap increases, I understand it if he ends somewhere over 11. If he wants 10.5, sign it today.
Easy.
Get it done. Just do it. And then, like I said, give him 7-8 years. Just do it. Lock him up forever. Make him an Av for life and be done with it. When it comes to Mikko, though, I guess my question is, are we comfortable giving him that much money in a world where the Avs do have other questions to build out the rest of their lineup? I'm not really a big believer in the struggles of teams that give individual players insane percentages of the cap, struggle to win cups. McDavid was 1 game away, right? So I don't really believe in that, but do you think this could cause the Avs trouble as far as cap concerns?
I struggle with it because of the contract they offered Val Nichushkin. Obviously, we don't feel really good about that in the moment, but that was the team's energy behind a player that they saw part of their long-term plan. They won together with him and wanted to win together again. And I think that's only heightened around what Mikko Rantanen means to this group. So I think they kind of have to, if they're going to honor him as a player. And they've shown as an organization that kind of respect for their players and how they've given Landeskog all the opportunity in the world to come back on his terms. And so for that reason, I think that they wouldn't and shouldn't hesitate to give Mikko that kind of term and build around him, because the reality is it is a luxury to be in this position as an organization, but Mikko Rantanen is another team's first priority. Like
That's
the Avs, he
true.
falls as kind of like the number 3 guy, but in another organization, Mikko Rantanen is somebody's number 1.
Fully agree. There are a dozen organizations that would do just about anything for a 100-point guy. So.
And what they accomplished together on the top power play unit, just for example, it's part of the success is because it's those same guys on the power play. And so it's not to say the success of the power play depends on it, but there is just so much that makes sense about keeping him a part of the core, keeping it intact.
So Mikko's the big one in the immediate, obviously. Personally, I don't think there's any world where he's not an Av next season.
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. Unless there's some anti-Colorado thing that's cropped up overnight. But the influx of all of the Finnish players also suggests that Rantanen has some influence as well. And I don't think that is nothing.
So let's look at the rest of the players that expire at the end of this upcoming season. Jonathan Drouin, Logan O'Connor. You have some depth forwards like Kiviranta and Chris Wagner. The just signed Oliver Shillington and Calvin DeHaan. All UFAs at the end of this year, as well as Alexander Georgiev. Which one of those guys is most important to keep? You're mostly looking at O'Connor, Drouin, and Georgiev.
There's this, I am so biased, but like I'm putting the priority 1 tier, Drouin and O'Connor, but different reasons, really different players. But you gotta set Drouin up, especially if he has a good year. Obviously, I'm kind of counting on that, banking on it. The Avs put themselves in a great position if he doesn't necessarily have a great year, or they're not really locked into anything. But he accepted lower than market value to stay in Colorado, and it just feels like this unspoken thing that he will get taken care of if things go well for him this season with Colorado. And it, similar to the conversation around Rantanen, like finding someone who complements a McKinnon in the top 6 is no easy feat. You have to invest in that. And so you got to invest in Drouin if he has another great year when that time comes. It's just too important to the top 6 where there is uncertainty around Nichushkin. They'll have more clarity by that point. Same for Landeskog.
It's true.
Either way, that will either add more importance and priority to Drouin's next contract. And then similarly, O'Connor, he's a tricky one because what value they've extracted from him through this point
It's been on such a good deal for them.
Exactly. It exceeds where he's at right now, so he would be due a little bit of a payday. And he strikes me as the type of guy who also enjoys what he has in Colorado, that I don't think it will come in as anything crazy, but he is due for the type of pay bump that comes at the expense of some of the other fringe players that they have liked having at the bottom of the lineup. They might have to get serious about their commitment to having a player like O'Connor and acknowledging the value that he brings and sacrificing some of those extra depth options they like to keep at the bottom of the lineup.
It's okay. You can say Miles Wood. It's fine.
They might have to get serious in their commitment to OC, and that could mean some difficult decisions like parting with luxuries that have benefited them before that they might not need, especially if O'Connor continues to be the player that we've seen, just like a JT Compher light, adding max value up and down the lineup and making everyone around him better.
Yep. Fully agree. It's the way Logan O'Connor plays it just fits the Colorado Avalanche too well.
Everyone should be playing hockey like OC. Yep. Any young player coming up the wings, like Cal Ritchie, for example, imagine him on a line with OC. Yep. He's going to just have the best habits, someone who can keep up with his speed. Not sure he'll be able to anticipate Cal Ritchie, but Cal Ritchie will be able to anticipate him.
There you go. Makes a ton of sense to me. I'm sold. Just do it right now. Don't even wait. Fourth line, Cal Ritchie, LOC. Easy money. And then LOC will play too well and move up the lineup. But that's
true.
Tomorrow's problem.
It's true.
All right. Things get a little bit more complicated. Obviously, the Georgiev situation. Historically, I don't expect the Avs to keep him almost regardless of what happens this year, because either he doesn't play that well, and why would you keep him, or he plays great and someone will give him $6 million. And the Avs just don't seem like they want to do that in this current era. They've continually found more cost-effective goalies. So I'm expecting this to be Georgiev's last season in Colorado either way.
I am too, and not because I expect him not to have a good year. I actually think he will have a good year in Colorado, and I'm counting on it. But to your point, I think they have appreciated having a low-cost option in net, and hopefully it's also a big step forward for Justus Annunen. Solidifies himself as a comfortable backup that could even maybe take on more of the game load into whatever that next year starter option is to help balance whoever they might be bringing in. That might be a little bit green or in need of a little bit of rehabilitation, kind of not unlike Georgiev.
Yeah.
And I think they'll just look for a cost-efficient option there, similar to as they have before. And I also think it's the type of position where when there has been inconsistencies at the hands of the way that they process the mental side of the game, I think there's fear around that at the goaltending position very specifically. Like, I think they can grant allowances to other players who play a different position if they've had different struggles. But there's just something about that position where it is so crucial to the success of a goaltender that they have a really strong mind. And I think that seed of doubt has been planted with Georgiev. It might not even be overcome in a single season, even if he has a great year.
Yeah. Doubt's a hard thing to shake sometimes. There's no doubt about that. Every hockey team is constantly adjusting year to year, but this next one is a bit of a bigger one for Colorado than it is for a lot of teams, because they have high-end things they have to do with Mikko, middle things that they have to do, whether that's Druin or LOC. What are they doing in net? There's just so many question marks after this season, and I know once you get into the regular season, that's next year's problem. That's why I wanted to talk about it now, because in the middle of December, who cares what next year is? You're trying to win right now. So I wanted to cover some of those things, and in a minute here, we'll get into, I don't know if I want to call it fantasy of the future, but maybe some less realistic things, or I don't know. Maybe we'll have a conversation where we do think some of this bigger moves might be realistic for Colorado over the next couple of years. But before we do jump in and figure out what the fantasy Avs might look like in 2028 or something like that, make sure you're going over to Bet365 and getting your bets in. Use code DNVR365 when you sign up with Bet365. Bet $5 on anything and get $150 in bonus bets when you do. Plenty of Olympic betting to get yourself in on. Still going on right now. I know Noah Lyles took gold in the 100. Shikari only got the silver. So
only.
This is America, all right? Golds or bust that's what's up.
You could hear Megan and I ready to kill you. That was so funny.
I know the woman who beat her was the first gold ever for St. Lucia, I think. So
also really cool.
Yeah. From a story standpoint, that's kind of dope. I'm not gonna lie, but You could have made some money on it. You probably could have made a lot of money on it if you bet on St. Lucia to win their first gold ever. Make sure you're doing it with Bet365. Use that DNVR 365 code. And, of course, when you gamble with Bet365, you must be 21 or older, physically located in Colorado. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER today. And then when you win a bunch of money and you want to be looking fly, make sure you go get your Shady Rays. Go to ShadyRays.com. Use code DNVR to get 35% off any pair of polarized sunglasses. Shady Rays has hundreds of choices to choose from, so you'll find something that looks good no matter what it is. They've been given 5 stars by over 300,000 people. So you want to jump on them. You want to go check out these sunglasses. And the coolest part is Shady Rays for the first 30 days after you get your pair of sunglasses. If you don't like them, you lose them or you break them, they'll replace them entirely for free. So you might as well give it a try. You might as well get a good deal on affordable sunglasses with code DNVR over at ShadyRays.com for 35% off any pair of polarized sunglasses. They even have prescription sunglasses if you're a blind person. You need to get Eric a pair of those. So
He just needs glasses.
yeah, I know.
He doesn't need polarized sunglasses until he just gets glasses.
Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I think one of the biggest things as we move into a future that might be unclear. 2 years down the line, whatever the outcomes are, both Landeskog and Nichushkin situations will be clear, whether that's them playing for the Colorado Avalanche actively or retired or not playing in the NHL, whatever. Those situations will be clear as far as the Avs cap hit is concerned. So my question then is this. With those getting sorted out, with what is expected to be a cap hit rising pretty significantly over the next couple of years, can the Avs start to look for a move, be it trade or free agency, where they pick up another superstar in this league? Or is that going to be too tough with not just the conversations we talked about, but you're a few years away from having to extend Cale Makar. There are other expenses the Avs are going to have to do. Can they fit another big contract in, or do you think they got to internally solve things more over the next couple of years?
I love the idea of a superstar being injected into this group and just making them more superhuman than they already are, but I don't think it's realistic.
Okay.
And it's because that luxury we talked about in having 3 key guys that you want to keep intact as part of the core is not one that every team has for a reason. It's hard to balance the cap in having that much talent and money heavy at the top.
Yeah, for sure.
It also becomes a question of where does that superstar go? They are getting set up. It's crazy for me to say what I'm about to say, but they're getting set up to have a future where they are set down the middle. Because I was just thinking future, who's my dream Avalanche to be one day? And I was like, I love Morgan Frost. And I think he needs a little bit more time, but I'd love Morgan Frost to be a part of the Avs. Except Kyle Ritchie exists.
He does.
And what becomes of Ross Colton? I could see Ross Colton moving on from the Avs at the end of this contract just because I think he would be eyeing second-line center opportunity, and Casey Middlestat kind of came in. And that's the other question, too. How does Casey Middlestat's next couple of seasons play out? But I'm not actually seeing this path to Morgan Frost becoming an Av as much fun as that would be, because Kyle Ritchie's going to become a key player. And then even on the defensive side, we still don't know what we have in Gulyev and Barons to some extent. I still think Barons rounds out more the bottom of the lineup, so we're not even talking superstar potential. But it's like, okay, so where are these superstars coming in ahead of even some of these guys? Whose spot are they really taking? Maybe at the wing position is where I see opportunity. And this is where my dream, Adrian mentioned it in the chat earlier, of Nick Ehlers as an Av one day comes to life. But I actually think he could come to Colorado under Jonathan Drouin-like circumstances where things just haven't worked out in Winnipeg. He is, I don't want to say nearing the end of his career. He still has plenty of runway ahead of him.
Guy, though,
but a fresh start guy who wants to chase a cup and could, maybe come on, take a team-friendly-ish contract to do so. So it's still not superstar potential in the way that maybe you meant when you asked the question, but it's filling a top 6 need, which kind of feels superstar-y. But beyond that, between a Rantanen, I'm just throwing him in the mix, a McKinnon and a Makar, It gets hard. I mean, Taves also, that extension puts him up there with Makar for as long as they continue to look as impressive as they are together.
Yeah, I'm with you on the defensive side. I just don't see how it fits with a high-end defenseman with Hayes and Makar locked in for eternity there. Unless someone is really desperate to chase a cup, how many of those level of players are going to want to be a second pairing guy?
Right, or if like really tough decisions have to get made down the line, if Taves' play declines as he gets older and he's not as complimentary to Makar. I hate it. You're right. I hate it. You're
He's
right.
forever 29. For
Nah,
sure.
I hate it. I won't even finish it.
I appreciate you trying to be realistic with this, but this topic was absolutely bait.
Sidney Crosby!
Yeah, exactly.
Moving Frost to the Avs actually feels more realistic now.
Right, exactly. Crosby's contract is up at the end of the year.
All right. I like where this is going.
We're going to get bombarded with this thought 8,000 times this season. So
how does, I mean, all right, I'm not trying to make this super realistic, but what does that look like? Casey Middlestat, third line?
Yeah, probably Casey Middlestat, third line. You're probably moving on from like a Ross Colton.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
This is already silly, but you have to, because then that even Middlestat money for a third line center feels a bit crazy.
Maybe you're a complete go fully crazy with it and one of McKinnon or Crosby plays the wing. I don't know.
I am intrigued. I could see something weird in McKinnon being like, I'm fine playing the wing because Sidney Crosby.
Oh, sick. I'm playing with Crosby and Druin.
Exactly. I could see that being like, you know what? He's better at this than me. I'm going to let him do that.
Oh, he can win a face-off? Sick.
Yeah, that's all you, my guy.
I'm in. This is the fantasy realm that we need to bring Crosby in.
Is it possible that the Avs could just have the Four Nations roster?
Just bring in all of Team Canada.
I like this.
They've already got the top defensive pairing. Why not build the top line,
wait, who
too?
else are we not accounting for? Hold on.
I don't think they're getting McDavid, but...
I mean, this isn't real. We can get McDavid.
Sure, why not, right? He's done with Edmonton because he can't win a cup there.
Yeah. Yeah, he says, I want a trade and you're retaining almost all of my salary.
The Avs can trade the next 7 years of first-round picks. It's fine.
All right. I like it. Who's on PP1 with Crosby?
So Crosby, McKinnon. I think you have to keep Rantanen on there. Who's the fourth forward, though?
It's kind of Arturi Lehkonen.
Yeah, you just have him. You just park him net front and watch all those dudes in Makar just go crazy around it.
Yeah.
I'm in. I'm sold.
Who am I not accounting for in this? Let's see. Makar.
Could be Druin.
That's who I'm not accounting for. Okay, actually, that's not too crazy.
Yep. And then we don't even need to discuss a second power play unit with those five because they're playing the full 2 minutes for sure. Yeah, there's no doubt. For what it's worth, Crosby is 36. I don't know if you care. He's still really, really good. But he's not prime Crosby that's going to put up 130 points or something.
He's still Jared McCann good.
There you Well played. Well played. That's obviously the name that everyone always brings up. Again, in reality, almost certainly not going to happen unless something truly crazy does evolve. But looking at Colorado down the line, I guess the next question I have is not necessarily superstars, but how much of Colorado's evolution as they continue to keep this cup window open comes from quality acquisitions outside of the organization versus you've already talked about Richie, you've already talked about Barons, you've already talked about Georgiev. At a certain point, do they have to lean more into those internal options, or can they continue living the way they have been?
They do, because they're going to have to find ways to save money to fill out the fringes of the lineup, and that's not to reduce those players down to just that. I think Cal Ritchie has more upside to be utilized higher in a lineup. I'm not going to get carried away and say second line, but I do think it's middle six potential for Ritchie in the future. And outside of that, though, kind of with the Georgiev conversation, not sure is fit just yet, have plenty of time to figure it out. Same with Barons. But I do think that crop of players, you do have to get at least two of them to hit. And it is to keep some cost-effective options in the lineup, because there are downsides to going with the experienced cost-effective lineup guy, no offense to any of these players, but like there's a reason the Chris Wagners and the Kivi Rantas are on the fringes fighting for NHL contracts. It's a difficult position to be in, and I'd like to see the players, the young players like a Richie with the skill upside that those players don't have round out the bottom of a lineup, because that's going to allow room for some of these Mikko Rantanen extensions that we're talking about to keep the top as top heavy as we've seen it.
It's kind of to go back to your Logan O'Connor conversation. You can see how valuable it is for someone that is capable of playing up in the lineup when you need them to. LOC is not going to blow you away on a second line. He's not really a second line player, but he can play there in a pinch. If you can get something like that out of a Cal Ritchie, if you can get a defenseman like Georgiev that if someone gets hurt, he can play up a little bit for you. It's so, so, so important for your lineup construction because injuries are bound to happen. And when you have players like a Kivi Ranta or a Chris Wagner, they really can't fill that increased role for you in any effective way.
No, their ceiling is pretty set. And so you know what you're going to get, but they can't really exceed expectation.
Yeah.
And that's what I think these young players coming up the wings have that potential to do. And the other reality, too, is the Manson and Girard contracts past this year come to an end. And so as solid as the decor is constructed right now with Makar and Taves at the top, they'll need to start figuring out the second and third pairing. And so it'll become important just in the defensive group for them to get some clarity on how that will look moving forward.
100%. And it's the problem, I think, is, I don't know if I'd say exacerbated by the cap increases, but just take a look at this offseason where guys like Yakov Trenin are getting north of $2 million. It's becoming harder and harder to find those cost-effective deals on depth guys that aren't the fringe players like a Kivi Ranta or something like that. So I'm not sure the Avs can continue the success they've had by finding guys like Coglianos or Darren Helms or those type of veteran guys that can take cheap contracts down the lineup. I don't want to say never because sometimes Chris McFarland is a wizard and just finds those guys, but it's not getting any easier.
I mean, even the conversation around Shillington this offseason, this was a player that a lot of people were buzzing about, and it felt all but official that Calgary would just extend him. So why are we even talking about this? Because I even got the sense that of some of the defensemen of his caliber on the market, Brandstrom was even ranked just a bit below Shillington in terms of interest. And they both fit a very similar mold. The fact that the Avs got both is a little bit crazy to me.
Yeah.
But I think that you're right. It will become challenging because on the same side of the coin in talking defensemen, people paid a premium for Tanev and for Zadorov. And so there is going to be that positionally at every turn that the Avs do have to have a pretty good preparedness for it because they can't afford to pay that kind of a premium for some of these types of players, for the stay-at-home defenseman type and eventually for the depth forwards that they rely on year after year but need a little bit more out of.
Yeah. A question from the Toyota chat here from FU 2006. What happened in 2006, bud? Do we anticipate the salary cap to continue going up only $4 million a year? There's nothing official out there, obviously, so take this with a grain of salt. But the numbers that have been rumored out there were that the salary cap could hit $100 million by the end of the 25-26 season. So not this year, but after the end of next year, they could be flirting with that $100 million cap number, which would be about $6 or $7 million this coming year and next. So those are the numbers that are out there. Who knows how real that actually ends up being.
It feels like it could be real from the episode a couple days back. There is market growth
for sure
in hockey and its viewership that maybe the league can afford to make that boost.
Yep. I hope so. Get everybody paid. Let's go.
Yeah.
So
our favorite, fourth liners around the league making good money. I love it.
And then you also talking about Makar in chat there, I see. The reality is when that contract is up for Cale Makar, Cale's a great guy. He probably won't do it. But if he wanted to, Makar could say, give me a max contract. And the Avs would just say, okay, Done. He literally can have as much money as he wants. There's not even a conversation there. The Avs are going to hand Makar a blank check, and he's going to write a number down, and that will be his next contract for 8 years. Like, that's the whole conversation there. So that one I just don't think is all that complicated.
Do you feel in good hands, too, with the type of person Makar is, that he's not going to put a number in there that he doesn't feel he can live up to, because he'll beat himself up every day that he does it?
Yeah. Needs to drop that number down a little bit for his own sake.
Yeah, you actually might need to have someone swoop in, like, no, Kale, add a zero. What are you doing?
Kale, that says $2 million. Yeah. That's not going to...
We get it. Self-deprecating king.
But Jonathan Druid took that much. Kale. No. All right. The other side of this, and this isn't really a contract conversation, but I think one that is probably going to continue to come up just because of how tenured he's become. Does Jared Bednar have a free pass for eternity as the head coach of this hockey team, or is it possible that that relationship comes to an end over the next 3 or 4 years?
It shouldn't. But my gut with everything we've seen around coaching decisions is that it's not a free pass, but he should have the most leeway of anyone ever. And it's
Agreed.
just because I also think the coaching carousel should be a cautionary tale that good coaches are hard to find. And you hear the way coaches talk about it too, and they have this unique perspective that obviously sees things from the standpoint of wanting the opportunity past 1 year. But the sense I get is that people are moving on from coaches too quickly, and it's not for the right reasons. I'm not even sure what the right reasons would necessarily be, other than
Mike
like
Babcock was the right
egregiously
reasons. Yeah.
like being weird and demanding to see your players' phones. And but past that, Bednar is proof of needing a little bit of time, and there has to be trust from the organization and the vision moving forward, and a confidence in the coach at hand to execute it and to be unwavering in executing it. And that's Jared Bednar. And that's going to continue to be Jared Bednar, because it was Jared Bednar under duress in that 2017 season, and it's who he's been ever since. I mean, he's had to coach his way through 2 playoffs where they've lost one of their best players unexpectedly, and obviously, the result was the team coming to an end, having an early summer. But I just think some of the challenges that he's had to face as a coach, we don't give him credit for navigating those waters. They're kind of unprecedented, too, with the Val Nichushkin situation. And he's just handled it so gracefully. That man should have all the leeway in the world. He also has such a good connection with his players, to include McKinnon. And so you have to entertain then a universe where a coach coming in newly has to establish a real connection with McKinnon, and that by itself feels daunting and very challenging and something that takes time.
I think it's interesting over this past offseason especially, we've seen a little bit of change in some of the staff in Colorado, and we've seen Nathan McKinnon actively get his strength training guy into the organization. There is obvious, every sport, your best players have some influence over the team. And the fact that Nathan McKinnon is bringing in guys like that, and there is no even rumors about Jared Bednar and what Nathan McKinnon wants, it seems like the team is pretty darn comfortable with Bednar in the coaching position, which is, I don't want to understate the level of feat that is. Most NHL head coaches, we're talking about like a 5-year maximum lifespan, and Bednar is going into what would be year 8 now. That's really impressive. And the fact that it still seems like it's a great fit, if it's me, don't mess with a good thing.
I agree.
So all the props in the world to Bednar on that front. Chat talking about Steven Lorentz as a possible 4C guy. It's someone we've talked about on the show before. I would like that as an option. Again, if the Avs do it, I'll be super happy. But at this point in the offseason, who knows what offers those guys have and what the situation is.
He feels like someone that I'd be happy to see there, but I imagine there's going to be somebody lingering. You talked about it earlier with the Tomas Tatar signing in Evan Rodriguez the year before it. I feel more realistically it'll be something like that down the wire, like close to the start of camp.
Yep.
And it might impress you more than Lawrence as an option. That's not
totally could, yeah.
be dunking on him necessarily. I just think that whatever they come up with will probably impress you more than that as an option, but I don't think it's a bad one.
Yeah. Again, Avs also have had success on the waiver wire in past too, so it could end up being that solution as well. The Avs always look at all their options. I'll put it to you that way. As far as that is concerned when it comes to solving that 4C spot. And I'll tell you this. Today, I feel a lot more possible that Cal Ritchie could be that guy than I did 2 months ago.
As I'm going through some of the possibilities for why that makes a lot of sense, in hearing you talk about the waiver wire, seeing the premium that teams paid for Yakov Trenin in this offseason makes me feel like any player that they can't guarantee will be on the Avs for the entirety of the year, they also probably then feel a lack of confidence that they would pass through waivers. And I'm talking about the fourth line center specifically.
Sure.
And so I could see the incentive then of, well, maybe we don't have to have that completely locked up. See what we have in Cal Ritchie first.
And then go from there.
there. Just because I do think they don't want to run into what they ran into with, wow, his name just escaped me. He went over to Czechia. He went to Philly. He was picked off waivers from Philly.
Nope.
It's escaping me. But he was a fourth line center target and got picked up off waivers. Philly took him.
Yep.
So I think they're probably like, yeah, I don't know if we really need to mess around with that, because if we do need to make some reassignments at the beginning of the year, they're waiver bait, whoever that is.
Yeah. It's always tough, especially when you're a high-end team that tends to have a little more depth players. You know, everyone's sitting around waiting to see who you put on waivers, and they could look to claim your guys. I'm trying to find this center as well.
Redhead.
Yep. He's got a face, and that face has a name that I cannot come up with. Surely Chat knows, but...
He won gold with Czechia this summer in the World...
All right, let's see. We'll find out.
Cup, World Championship. Sedlak, Lucas Sedlak.
There it is.
Here it is.
It's always can rely on Chat to
Thanks,
remember
guys.
the name of the guy's face that I can see in my head, but not actually remember his name. and who knows, right? I think we all like to live in the moment a lot and desperately want the Avs to solve all of these problems today. But the reality is you have Nathan McKinnon, you have Mikko Rantanen, you have Cale Makar, Middlestad, Druin, Tave. The Avs have the pieces in place where they'll be fine in the regular season. If they say, yeah, we'll deal with the 4C at the trade deadline, fine. Not a big deal. They need to solve it because you like those extra pieces for their playoff push.
Absolutely.
But if they want to do it in February, does it really matter that much if they do it then instead of in September? To me, personally, no.
There's always the trade deadline following.
Yep.
That I could see they'll have more clarity on the rest of the lineup and could address needs in a targeted way at that point in time too. Because you got to feel really comfortable about how stacked they are at D. Maybe we can grant some allowances to the bottom of the forward group at the start of the year. Just let the top guys do some of the heavy lifting early on, and let Cal Ritchie too. He'll take every ounce of that opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
That's exciting for him. It doesn't take away from his chance, but it took away from Sam Malinsky's.
Yeah, it did. Did make life a little bit harder for Malinsky for sure. But you know what? Maybe he'll earn it in training camp. Maybe everyone else struggles.
I shouldn't speak doubt on him like that.
We'll see. At the end of the day, any move that you feel like Colorado made themselves better with, you have to like. I think they did that with Shillington, even
Easily.
if it's at the detriment of someone like Sam Malinsky. So, for what it is worth, the Avs are a little bit lacking in perhaps trade capital if we're talking about the trade deadline.
We have to be honest about that part.
They only have 1 second-round pick over the next 3 years. That's not true, actually. They have a bunch of second-round picks. They only have 1 third-round pick over the next 3 years. But they don't have next year's first. Their second from next year is New York's, not theirs. And they have other bits and pieces down the depth of their organization. But realistically, if the Avs are making moves at the deadline that are splashy, you're talking about moving out more first-round picks. That's the cost of doing business. Now, if you want to get into assets as far as prospects getting traded, things get way more complicated. We don't really have time to really deep dive that at the moment. But just keep in mind that if they want to go the trade deadline route, stuff costs things.
And our prospects don't hold the same value in the eyes around the league as they do our own. You know, the Oscar Olausson conversation. Not getting a deal across the finish line unless there's something really enticing in front of it.
Yep, agreed. It's every team has their Oscar Olausson of their own, right? It's not some unique thing that Colorado possesses with a prospect like that. Something like a Cal Ritchie, a little bit more unique, but nobody wants to trade their Cal Ritchies, so we'll see. I don't envy Chris McFarland's job. I think it would be a super cool job to have, but I'm confident if I had his job, it would take 18 months and I'd be fired because I'd have screwed everything up. So I'm glad I'm not an NHL GM, I guess. If someone wants to pay me like one, though, hit me up. I'm available.
I'm available to do this job badly.
I didn't really have anything else. I think we pretty much covered anything. Anything you wanted to touch on, Megan?
I did want to ask your question back to you when you asked about the priority for players who will be due for a new contract at the end of this year. Who you saw as the priority?
It might be a cop-out answer, but it is Drouin depending on what the price looks like. If we get into the offseason and Drouin's like, hey, I just had another 60-point season and I want $7 million, boy, it's going to be tough for the Avs to get that done. If Drouin is like, hey, I just had a solid season, give me $4 million, give me the Ross Colton deal, I'd be like, absolutely yes, no doubt about it. Probably ends up somewhere between those two numbers. Maybe it's 5, 5.5, 6, something like that. And I think I'd be, depends on term, depends on how much the cap goes up, depends on what else the Avs are doing. But to me, Drouin is the most important piece of the bunch, not just because of Jonathan Drouin, but the evolution of the Avs top six, where particularly with the unknowns that continue around Gabe Landeskog and trying to continue to build that culture in Colorado, you can see the connections Drouin has with McKinnon. McKinnon's also built the connections with someone like a Lehkonen. And Mikko's a pretty easy guy to get along with for everybody. It seems like you've talked about the Finnish group that the Avs are building too. When you start seeing those culture pieces get picked off, and there's nothing the Avs can do about the Landeskog situation, it is what it is, it becomes important to hang on to some of those guys. And the off-ice stuff is important too, even if our analytic brains maybe don't look at that as much as we should. So to me, that's why Drouin is the most important piece of that bunch to get in there. LOC, kind of the same conversation. If he wants to come back for $2.5 million, great. If he wants $4 million, I love you, LOC, but not going to happen.
What if he wants Miles Wood money?
Yeah, I'd give him Miles Wood contract today, and then I'd trade Miles Wood tomorrow.
Doesn't it feel like we're already in that room, even with the Drouin
It does.
extension? In order to maybe make some of that money work and get him in that in-between number that he likely deserves if he has another year like the last.
Yep.
It probably means finding a new home for Miles Wood. And it's not even like Miles Wood failed. It just, the vision for how the forward group needed to be constructed changed.
Yeah, there's a hierarchy, right? Who's more important to the Avs lineup, Miles Wood or Jonathan Drouin? It's definitely Jonathan Drouin. That conversation might be closer between Miles Wood and LOC, but I still think it's LOC. So
I think so too, in a way that is not aimed to dunk on Miles Wood. It just feels like that's one of those things they have to part with. They liked their fast, bumbly power forward, but they might need to move on from him.
And that's why stuff costs things.
They wanted him for so long.
Well, they got him for a long time. So until they move it. But, in a perfect world, everybody fits on the lineup. But at the end of the day, hockey's a business and some decisions are going to have to get made, whatever those end up being. We do have to wrap up today's show. We appreciate all y'all hanging out with us. We'll be back tomorrow. I know all of y'all love what ifs, so we're talking some of the biggest what ifs in Avalanche history tomorrow. And we're live through the rest of the week, so please come join us for that. Like and subscribe here on YouTube. Go check us out on thednvr.com. Consider becoming a diehard and supporting us. We will be back tomorrow, and we will talk to you then.
We all silly like the mayor.